Page Guru, aka Mr. Guru. Welcome to 10 Questions, my friend.
Jimmy, what's going on, man? Thank you for having me on here. And from what I understand, it's the 75th episode.
The 75th episode. It's hard to believe. I reached out to Jeff and said, hey, Mr. Guru, will you please come on 10 Questions for my 75th episode? And he was nice enough to say yes. He doesn't do a ton of interviews. And I think really, have you done any? Do you do any at all other than sitting down with Tom?
Yeah, I don't really think so. I don't generally like to talk too much about myself, but I've been asked to, and I probably will. It's just I get busy like you, right? We all have lives, and it's like how much effort can you put towards everything? And it's
Sure.
tough. So
No, it is. And I was talking to somebody the other day. I actually got interviewed. Somebody asked me to be on one of their shows. And we were talking about, like just doing YouTube and content and things like that. And I was like, look, a lot of people don't understand it's a true grind, and if you're a dealer like you are, where you're selling books too, and you're doing all those things with kids, with family, with work, with all the things you do, man, it's tough sometimes to just do it all.
it is. And like you said, as a dealer, and really I look at myself more as a collector because
Mm-hmm.
that's how I prioritize my stuff first, because I justify keeping a lot. And
Sure.
and luckily I'm not I mean, there's all kinds of facets to who collects and how they collect. But for me, I justify my collecting by being able to push out stuff that's least of interest to me. So I do a great amount of selling, just so I can, like I mentioned, make sense of keeping the things I keep.
Sure. No, absolutely. All right. So let's jump into this thing.
Let's do it.
Question one is really it's your origin story. Like, what
Okay.
got you into collecting? Was there somebody? Was it just something you found? Like, what got you into the hobby?
Yeah, I don't. That's an interesting question because like everyone's got their stories, but for me, I didn't have anybody into comics or really collecting anything, one specific thing. Um, my uncle, and you probably hear this, uncles, grandfather, dad, whatever. He did have an antique store, so I mean we were close-ish, just like any other family, but nothing super tight. But I think I was always interested in maybe that concept of having a store full of cool old stuff, and maybe that lends to the idea of collecting things. My dad did own an appliance store, and we used to have to go down streets in his truck, driving down alleys, finding appliances that were thrown out or left aside, and looking at me like, "Hey, can we refurbish this? Can we fix it up? Can we, repurpose it, and get it back going?" So that's how we used to get things. That's how we got stoves and fridges, and we'd fix them up, and he resell them. And when I say we, I mean really him. I was only like 10, 11,
You were
12
the
years old.
muscle.
Yeah, sure. If you saw me at 10, 11, I wouldn't be the muscle. I'd be the pudge. I was a big overweight kid, for a long time in my life. But I would say, for me, I always found I was big into art. I'm an artist. I went to art school. I always drew as a kid. Naturally, I loved watching cartoons, and I'm sure this is very familiar, with a lot of people. So I lived across the street from a 7-Eleven, so that made it very convenient for me to see and be exposed to comics because they were on a spinner rack. And at that time, comics were popular, and Garbage Pail Kids was another thing. I didn't really get into sports cards. That wasn't until high school. But really, comic books just, I think, were introduced to me through cartoons. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Loved that cartoon. Comic books on the spinner rack across the street, the 7-Eleven, because I went there all the time for my slurps. And that was the beginning of being introduced. And I quickly found out where a comic book shop was in my area.
Mhm.
It was called Golden Apple on Melrose in West Hollywood, LA area. An absolutely unbelievable store. It really was. I mean, I'm lucky to have a store like that where they had like vinyl statues that were being painted. I didn't even understand how come these statues look like this, or did they come that way? I remember buying one and I was like, oh, I have to assemble this nonsense. I remember getting a Venom statue, like, wait, it doesn't come painted? I have to glue it together, sand it, paint it. I mean, it was just so you appreciate it more when you saw it finished. But anyways, the store was amazing because they had statues of huge life-size alien figures, a great comic collection, and I jumped into the old stuff almost immediately. When I mean old, I'm talking like Bronze Age at the time.
Sure.
Okay, so like I remember getting a price guide, studying it ferociously, Okay, because there was no internet at the time. This was probably in 88, 87, somewhere around there as a kid, and loving it. I mean, I loved the old stuff from the beginning. Iron Man 1, I remember seeing that cover and being just captivated by how beautiful it was. Gene Colan, beautiful purples and blues. And then Spider-Man 129 was another one I remember seeing up there and just dreaming one day to get him. And I don't know, went straight to old real quick, real
That's
quick.
cool. So, like, did you have that period where, as a kid, you were doing your thing, and then, like the rest of us, you get in high school, college age, you find beer, you find girls, you find those things, and you kind of venture away. Did that happen for you? And did you come back at some point, or was it just always in your life?
It was not always in my life. It's exactly like you said. I used to peddle comic books at my junior high school and Garbage Pail Kids. So I was quickly buying and selling at a young age to where I got suspended because I was buying and selling stuff at school, and there were comic books, you know. And I remember that. And then we moved, and I did comics up through high school. And then once after high school, I did take a break. I went to Art Institute of Seattle, so I did a little trade school. Then I went to University of Washington, and so comics were at a standstill for a good 6 years there. Then you're like out of college, you're like, I have to have a career,
Sure.
So you get thrown out there and you try. And so I did that for a few years, just trying to find my place. And yeah, it wasn't until I got a steady job and making income and things slowed down where I realized I started looking up comics again. And I remember going on to an auction house, and it was Heritage Auctions. No idea. I'm just putzing around online trying to find um, where to buy comics. And I see this auction. I buy this lot of comics, and a giant size X-Men 1 and a bunch of other stuff. And I just wanted to dive in. So I dove in. I think it was like $100, $150. I bought like these books, and then I flipped them online. And I was like, oh, I just made money selling comics. That was fun. That was pretty easy. So I was like, okay, I can make money doing this. And that was just a thought. But like for me, anything I do, I dive right in. So
Sure.
next thing you know, I'm buying, 25 to 50 long box collections on Craigslist. Okay. And this is earlier on in Craigslist where you could do that and it was less competitive. It's probably 2004, maybe three. And I remember buying this huge collection and just diving in. And that is really how I got started again. I started peddling dollar books, really. I mean, that was it. And just jumping in, learning. And that transitioned me into other stuff and older books. And we could talk about that if you got other questions later. But
Sure. No, absolutely. No. And I love that. I love that origin story. And everybody's is similar, but everybody's is unique, because it's unique to them and the process they go through. I mean, I have a very similar story, I had an uncle who traded at flea markets, and he did it as a side hustle because he was a coal miner. I live in coal country, and he was a coal miner, and coal mining was up and down, so he had a side hustle where he would go to flea markets. He'd sell comic books, he'd sell ball cards, whatever. And I was always allowed to hang out there, and I was allowed to read whatever I wanted. But then we didn't have an LCS. Like I live, like where I'm sitting right now, Jeff, my closest LCS is an hour away. I mean, I live in rural Eastern Kentucky. And, so it was the supermarket with a magazine rack, and it was the art. Did the art draw you to it first, or did you start reading the stories? Because back then the stories can be a little campy. It can be hard to read at times. So was it the art where you're an art student or an artist? Did that kind of draw you to the books originally?
yeah, I'll be honest, I wasn't usually or generally a big reader of the comics. I looked at them instantly because I went straight to the old as appealing by the cover and then as a collectible. So I always looked at it as because it's vintage and collecting it.
Sure.
And I try to take care of it. And I did read stuff, but usually would be graphic novel format. Like Dark Phoenix Saga is one of the most memorable reads I think I remember as a kid. And just getting into some of the characters. But I watched the cartoons heavy, and that was enough for me. And I just didn't get into reading. And I didn't get into reading comic books till much later in my life. And so for me, it was always the cover art. If the cover art wasn't appealing or interesting to me, the book was interesting to me.
Sure, that makes sense. I mean, no, I mean that's what it was for me. It was seeing the cover, and then I'm like you, which I'm a big reader by nature. Like I've always read books. And I just kind of found my way back, to comics. Once my kids got old enough to where they didn't want to hang out with me anymore, I wasn't cool anymore. Then I found my way back in, and I really started reading a lot of books. And so I've really enjoyed that part of the hobby. All right. So question 2, everybody's handle or their nickname. Is there a good story about why you're called Golden Age Guru? Did somebody give you that name?
No, it's one of those things where I just came up with a moniker for myself. I was another name on Instagram first. I was Elite Comics. All right, that's my LLC, Elite Comics LLC. And then I jumped on the channel with Tom. And for me, like, I understand the Golden Age very well, but Tom's very good. Tom's the gentleman whose channel I'm on, Comic Tom 101. We're all on there as a team, but he's the main face and figure there. Brought me on. He's local to me and started this channel. And he always reminds me, he's like, hey, you know stuff that other people don't know. And for me, it's second nature. And people that I hang out with too, it's a lot of that second nature. And so I speak a language and I think I take it for granted. Okay. So he always tells me, he's like, listen, the stuff you're talking about, most people don't know and would like to know. So Golden Age was just my focus. And we had the sensei who was Russ on our show. And so I was like, okay, well, I love the Golden Age. And I did a list of names. I talked to my kids and my wife, and they weren't very helpful. So I was like, and I finally came up with, I was like, Golden Age Guru. That's what I'm going to be. You're the sensei. I'll be the guru. I love it with enough passion to where I feel like I could be a guru. And it's always a learning anyway. I don't want to tell people that I'm this super knowledgeable person who knows everything, because you don't. There's so much to it. It's a beautiful time frame in comics to really get into and dive super deep, because there's a lot of things lost in history, and uncovering that and finding and digging it's super fascinating.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, it's something that you just brought up, and it was actually one of the questions I had put down here, and it's something that you said, is that you had a knowledge, and I picked that up in watching you on Tom's channel, or just following you on Instagram or whatever, is that you do have a really in-depth knowledge about Golden Age books and really books in general. Okay, let me preface it like this, because my uncle I was telling you about, he read constantly, and not read books, like he read price guides. He read, if you went to his house, there was a stack of books sitting beside his chair, and he read that stuff constantly. He knew what things were worth. He knew what he should be selling for. He knew the history of them. For someone that's doing comics, and this is something that I'm trying to do now, is I'm almost trying to memorize keys. Like, so when I'm out, digging in long boxes, or I'm at an antique store, I know what I'm looking at, and there are memorization techniques that you can go through that I'm working through right now, trying to do that. And I'm doing even a segment to help me do that I put out on the YouTube channel. What do you do, or what have you done in the past to help you, gain this knowledge, or even when you're out looking at books, what you're looking for?
Boy, okay. So this is not an easy question, because there's a lot to it. And right now there's a wealth of knowledge online and many publications now. There didn't used to be. I'll tell you, the first resource that worked for me in understanding the Golden Age was the Gerber photo journals. They're 2 very large coffee table books. Gerber went around the country and took photos of every Golden Age comic book that was ever published, and he put it into a full color book. They're amazing pieces. You can still buy them to this day, and I recommend those for anybody who's interested in the Golden Age. It's just a great piece of reference material to go through and see every book. Now, he didn't get everything, because there's some stuff he couldn't find. Okay, but you can find pictures of that online. There's not many. They're called they don't have photos for them. And that got me started. So I went through that book and I highlighted all these books that I thought were appealing to me and started to look at them. And that's interesting, because that's one way to do it. All right. And I found that in real life, when you actually see these books, it's a completely different emotion. You're like, oh, wow, I actually didn't highlight this, but seeing it in person, I'd love it that much more. And it's also that weird thing where when you acquire a book that you've always wanted and you get it and you realize it and you're like, you know what? I don't like it as much as I thought I would.
Sure.
Okay. So there's so much emotion to collecting. As for the knowledge aspect of it, it takes time. The reason I got into Golden Age was because I kept jumping into collections and realizing, oh, there's something more than Silver Age, because most people don't recognize these characters. And why would you? They're not relevant. They're not being used for any purpose. So when you look at a wall at a convention, I say this all the time, you will see everything you know. You'll look at the silver, you look at the bronze, you recognize those characters. But the Golden Age, you completely glance over. It's white noise. You don't even see it. You don't pay attention to it. So it doesn't register. That's the part of the education you need. So when you know what's good, what's rare, that's when you can make a move on something that most people are not familiar with and get value out of it.
Sure.
But you also need that circle. So it's for Golden Age, it's such a nurtured environment because you need to find the people, you need to have the platform, you need to know what it is, and all that takes is a lot of time. And I find that this time learning that is easier than anybody who collects modern books. If you're a modern book collector, to me, you are so much more, you are so capable to learn the Golden Age because you don't have to keep up every week with 50 new titles and variants of every book and stay on top of this quick changing game. You literally learn what's been done. You know the books, they haven't changed, they are what they are, and just become educated and proficient and relevant and spend that time in knowing them, and you would have that knowledge forever. I mean, you just will. You'll know what these books are, you know what these characters, you'll know which covers are important, which covers aren't. And that's another ace, up your sleeve to have in your repertoire. Because right now, modern comic collecting, I can't even imagine. Like that blows my mind. Of having to keep on top of that. I'd rather deal with the bronze and the silver and know what's important and staying important, opposed to what's gonna be important and try to play that guessing game.
Right. No, that makes total sense. I mean, because it's there. You're right. It doesn't change. In modern, there's so much that comes out. Every week there's so many books that are coming out. And then collected editions and omnibuses. And it's just massive. Now I have gotten into recently, like looking, kind of getting collected editions or omnibuses and more or less for the reading part of it. And then going and instead of trying to complete runs, in a lot of cases, there's some runs I still try to complete, but of older books. But if I really like it, once I read it, if I love it, a lot of times I'll go out and try to get the singles. But all right, so let's move to question 4. And you were kind of talking about it, and I was telling you before we came on that Golden Age, my collecting since I got back in has changed, and it feels like it changes every 6 months. It's like I got attention deficit disorder when it comes to collecting. But I have found that I am drawn more to the Golden Age and even Silver Age more and more as I continue on. I'm like you. There's so much in the modern era. Now, I like to read, so I do read a lot of modern stuff. I do a lot of new comic book day stuff. I just like to read. But as far as my collecting goes, I find myself really venturing back. So someone like me who is a complete novice when it comes to Golden Age, because you'll get on eBay or online and look, and there's all kinds of different titles. There's Fawcett, there's Disney stuff, Tom and Jerry, the Flintstones. Like if someone was wanting to get into it like I am, and I don't necessarily want to break the bank to get started, I just want to dip my toe in it to kind of get used to it. Where would be a good place to start in your mind?
I mean, that used to be a much easier question because there used to be more options for that.
Sure.
But I would say the best places to just dip your toe are going to be quality publishing titles. So Blackhawk, Modern Comics, Captain Marvel Adventures. Captain Marvel Jr. has actually gotten pretty expensive, so I wouldn't go that route. War books. Absolutely, war books, extremely easy to get into, especially if they're VG or lower. Romance books. So anything in the late 50s to late 40s is in war and romance, and crime as well. Crime is great. Crime's got fantastic covers, good art, good stories. Those would be and that's a lot. I'll be honest with you. You get into the war, the crime, the romance, and just dip your toe a little bit into the Golden Age and some of the quality publishing titles, like I said, Blackhawk, Modern, Captain Marvel, Plastic Man. those type of things, then you'll at least get you warmed up to it. And again, modern books can be just as expensive. Okay,
Sure.
I mean, it can get pricey, but that's just a good way to go. You don't have to break the bank. War books, especially, you can probably get them for 20 to $50. Romance, probably $20 to 25. Just obviously they go up from there with keys and better artists tied to them, but there's a lot out there you can get into for really cheap.
Yeah, no, because I see all these different ones, and you're kind of looking. I'm like, I know people. My kids like Disney, and so like I saw some Disney books. Are those books are they a dime a dozen? Is that something if you
Yeah.
dig it? I mean, I know collect what you like, right? But I mean, if you just wanted some older books just to have in your collection, is that really not where you should go? You should go more towards the things you said.
I mean, you collect what you like because you don't know what you're collecting. Once you know what you're collecting, like, I mean, obviously you collect what you like if you know what you're doing. But if you're just now getting in, then collect what you like until you realize what you really like, and then put your efforts towards that. For funny animal books like that, yes. I mean, those Walt Disney's Comics and Stories, Merry Melodies, that's extremely overpublished. I mean, those print runs were enormous, one of probably the most read books at the time. So there's a lot out there still to this day. So there isn't a lot of value. Carl Bark seems to be the one that you want to collect when it comes to funny animal duck books.
Mm-hmm.
Take that for whatever it's worth. But even then, unless it's in this pristine grade, you could still get them for fairly reasonable, being a quasi key in the golden age. So yes, funny animal books. If you want to start there, sure. I don't necessarily recommend it because I don't think the funny animal books take you down a path to where you're going to want to get to the more collected titles, as it's still more cartoony. If you get into
Sure.
some of that other stuff, it's less cartoony, more traditional comic style for that time frame where you get the finer lines and the artwork and less, goofy nonsense.
And what about condition for you? Like again, somebody who's just starting out, maybe you find a Captain Marvel or Captain Marvel Junior or something like that, and the price is up there. I think on all those the price is up there. I don't care what the condition is, but do you recommend any grades better than no grade? I mean, like what's your kind of recommendation when you come to those things?
I mean, obviously, for just starting, if that's what you're referencing,
Sure, yeah.
I say solid 1.5 to 2.5s. I mean, that's plenty. You get a book that's 2.0. It's got the front cover, the back cover. That's all you really need to just get warmed up. And again, Captain Marvel Adventures was a long run. You can get
Mm-hmm.
some of the later issues and the in betweens. Doll Man. It's a funny title, but the artwork was great. Good characters, great interior stories, good artwork, and that stuff's crazy cheap. Doll Man feature comics also, but with Doll Man in it, um, are just two other fantastic titles. So, like I said, get in any way you can. With a 2025, you can't be disappointed with that. Get it for $20, $35. They're really not that expensive in the grand scheme of the Golden Age. And give yourself that window to crawl through to get started. And, for me, like this is a book here I just bought. And I don't like for my personal to buy books. I have a standard for my books, but this is a rare book. For me, it's Lou Fine. I love Lou Fine. Okay, great Golden Age artist. I always like the elongated characters.
Mm-hmm.
I've been looking for this book for a very long time, very long time. And so the fact that I had a chance to buy one just recently, it's got moderate amounts of color touch on cover, front cover reattached with glue and cover. I mean, it's got all this nonsense. I still bought it because I want to at least own it at some point. But this is one of those books that now that I've owned it in my hands and seen all the stuff to it, it's like, I'm ready. I'm going to let it go and find one that's not restored. But I did buy it because I wanted one finally, and I had that opportunity. So sometimes you just get what you can get, and you don't throw a fit. You just do it.
Sure. Right. No, if you want the book, right, you go buy it. And then, like you said, you get it and you're like, okay, now you know what you've got and you can, make that assessment and move on to the next thing. Now, when you're buying, and you can kind of, hit on both sides. If you're just starting and then kind of what you do today yourself as a collector, do you recommend going ahead and buying them graded or is raw okay too?
Yeah, I would. If you're just starting, first off, it's going to be hard to find graded low grade copies of books.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're just trying to jump in, yes, just buy them raw. They're less expensive. You're generally not going to have to worry about restoration if they're on the low grade already, low end. And really, you're buying stuff that even if there's a little restoration, it doesn't really matter, right? If you're going to buy the higher end books and you don't know what you're doing, let's just say you do have financial backing or support and you want to get in on the deep end, because some people do. They do really well in Bronze Age and Silver Age. Like, you know what? I'm going to buy something key in the Golden Age. If you don't know how to shop for books at a convention raw or on eBay and how to look for those restoration things such as trimming and glue and tear seals, I mean, you name it, cover cleans, then yes, you should buy graded. You should buy graded books either at auction houses, at conventions. Do yourself a favor. You don't want to get burned, especially if you're just getting into it. You don't need that negative event to happen in your life because you spent $15,000 on a book and now it's, a purple label and it's 3,500.
Right. No, I mean, that makes total sense. And let's make this, we'll make this question 5. Is that, again, it's something that you said there that like you said, if you don't know what you're looking at, right, buy graded. But if you do, if you want to get into, like, how do you know if a book's been glued? How can you tell if it's been trimmed? Like, is there resources that a person like me could go to and study those things? Or is there even like classes you can take? I don't know, to where that's something that you could find out.
There's a plethora of information on YouTube. So I'm pretty sure you can Google this right now and any one of those and have an actual visual video. Having the stuff in hand, like experiencing it, is really the best way. But I'll tell you, when corners are too sharp, okay, or there's not the proper overhang at times, or they're short on the cover, or the interior short, or that there's a top angle that angles just a little bit, the top edge. There's things you can tell with the trim. And most of the trimming happens, and Golden Age had a lot of issues. Like, a lot of people didn't think restoration was a problem back in then.
Sure.
Golden Age, color touch was fine, and people used to do that. So you got to be really careful when you're looking at collections that people have had or amassed over 30, 40 years. And every book you got to look at, because you just don't know what happened in that 50-year time or 40-year time that it was out in the universe. And like I said, color touch is probably one of the easier things to detect. You can see the sheen difference. You can hold it up to the light and the light will come through the cover. But if it doesn't come through in certain areas, it comes differently. That's a good sign that an opaque material, color pencil or something else was put on there. Glue is fairly easy as well. It's usually hard, crunchy on the spine. So you'll want to touch along the spine. That's why they don't recommend wearing gloves, because you need that tactile feel to feel, paper change. When people used added paper to build the book back up, or they used rice paper, which is a type of material to fix a tear. So now you need to feel for that. You got to look at it. So really feeling along the spine is a great start. If it's hard anywhere, that's most likely glue. All right. As for other things like staple replacement, that's tough. But if there's rust all around the staple and the staple is shiny, that's a good sign the staple was replaced.
Right.
Because that staple should be rusted. Okay, trimming is one of the harder things. Cover clean, they're doing a lot of interesting things with the way people are cleaning covers these days that is not detectable, but it's also not manipulating the book. It's a tough one, but generally there's a chemical smell. If it's really been soaked in a bath of chemicals to clean that cover, you can smell the cover. I have a book here that had a cover clean, and you could smell the chemicals on it, kind of a chlorine, bleachy smell to it. And it also, it's hard to tell by feel if you don't have the experience, but really that smell gives it away.
No, that's interesting.
It's a few things. There's so much. There's
so much. Right. Yeah, no, so much. Yeah, no, and you're right. It's just one of those things like when you started talking, I just kept thinking back to my uncle, and I talk about him a lot on here because he was my biggest inspiration, I guess, into what kind of got me into the hobby. And then my dad, it was my dad's brother, and my dad didn't collect it all, but he was all about it. Whatever I wanted, he was cool with. So, and we all used to run around together. So, no, just some of those things you were saying, and even listening to you talk about it just kind of took me back to listening to him and how he would say, okay, you got to do this. And it was all experience. It was just getting out, buying the books, and then figuring it out as you go. He said, the thing you can't do is make the $20,000 mistake. You can't do that. You've got to be careful. And if if it's those cases, you go to somebody that knows more than you do, and try to help yourself figure it out. All right, so let's go to question 6. Now, I saw you tell a story once on Tom's channel on the show about it was a Green Lantern book, and you told the story about how you found this Green Lantern book. So it made me kind of wonder, like, are there any other maybe like epic finds that you just found like crazy value in something, or even an epic fail, like where you got something and you were like, oh, this sucks. I totally got killed here.
Oh, man, yeah, I've had some really good finds. But again, I have not just the resource, but the support, and I've chosen to make this what I do. So you got to remember, what I'm speaking from, it's from my experience and what I've chosen to do in my life. And when you choose certain things to do, you also sacrifice on other ends, right? So I've gone in on comics, and so I go to plenty of conventions. I'm out there socially on multimedia platforms, and I get lots of contacts and find things. Okay, so if you're willing to do that, you will strike it at some point and multiple times in your life. You'll also, there'll be 99 crap no's, but there's always that yes out there somewhere waiting for you to find. And I hear it all the time. People find collections all the time. Every year, I mean, I know of multiple collections that are unbelievable, multiple unbelievable grails, action ones, Detective 27s. They are still out there. Okay, I was working on this collection for over a year plus, and I just finally last month got the old no, it's not going to work out. But I worked over a year and a half, and I know that I gave every bit that I could to get that collection. I did everything I can, okay? And there was no way I was going to get her anybody just because of the way the will was set up. All right, it was going to go to where it's going to go to. And that was a good feeling, but it also hurt because that had, again, the mega grails in there. That like lifetime achievement award would be given to me for getting this, okay?
Right.
So that was just a recent loss, okay? And in my experience, I have not given everything that I needed to or attacked it with enough vigor that others do. And that's like an empty feeling because you're like, oh, I had that opportunity, I missed out. So that was really recent. And then as for wins, they come out of anywhere. You have no idea where a win's going to come from generally. Okay, so I remember meeting this gentleman out in New Mexico and going down there, and I was going down there to look at a Captain America Comics #1 he had. And I was looking at this book. I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. It was going to be expensive, but it was going to be so worth it. And I get there, and I'm looking at this book. And then he tells me he's got a bunch of other timely books too. So he's got this massive timely collection. I have an amazing photo of it too. Just stacks of 1940s Captain America comics, Marvel Mystery Comics. I mean, you name it. And I'm looking at this Captain America one, and I'm like, the centerfold is married. I tell him, I was like, this is a married centerfold. He will not believe me. So straight up, no. I was like, but you got to look at it. The staples for the centerfold don't line up with the book at all. Okay, this is clearly does not belong to this book. If it was stapled together, the staples would be in the same page. So when you line it up, I was like, this is married. He didn't believe me. I was like, listen, let's send this into CGC. Okay, if they look at it and tell me that it's not married, I will pay for all of it. I'll pay for whatever fees CGC's charged for this, and I'll buy the book. Sure enough, it came back married centerfold. Okay, they told me. And him, and so I didn't buy it. Hindsight, I should have bought it anyway, really. But I did buy a bunch of other stuff that I wasn't there for. Tons of timelies, and he was one of the hardest people I've ever had to work with. I mean, one of the hardest, grouchiest, most pain in the ass people I've ever dealt with. Still came out with like probably 35 timelies, which was a big, big deal. I left a bunch. I probably, in hindsight, again, another hindsight, likes to remind you and kick you in the balls from time to time that you should have bought things. But regardless, I did very well, kept some stuff. And that was a win-loss. And sometimes you need to do that. You're like, okay, I lost here. Oh, let's flip. What else do you have? Do you have magic cards? Do you have video games? Are there other things that you can learn about too, by the way, when you're collecting comics? Because you're out there. When you're out there looking for comics, you're like, okay, that's one thing. But if you can become proficient in something else, man, you're just that more dangerous, and you can sometimes salvage a bad deal by getting into another deal with that same person. So wins, losses, yes, we have them. I have plenty others. We can go on and on. That All American 16, first appearance of Green Lantern. I never thought I would own that book, or if it was going to be a very long time. So to find it in the wild, and to find it because a friend of mine told me about it in San Francisco on a Craigslist ad. Okay, I live in Washington State. He sent me this. He's like, hey, you should ask this guy. It's Craigslist. You assume the worst. You're like, oh my
Right.
God, you have this holy grail top 5 to 10 books in all the comics. It's on Craigslist, really? And there are so many amazing shops and collectors in San Francisco. So, you just assume someone else is going to get it. But nobody gave it its chance. So between like 3 weeks of correspondence and me kind of just throwing out this flyer of an email, and then him getting back to me 2 weeks later because my email was buried, and then starting this conversation, and then realizing this sounds legit. Is this really? Is this legit? And it's like, I think it is. And he sends me photos, and all of a sudden the grade starts dropping from what he thought, but so does the price. And I remember him having a conversation with me because he was now starting to think about the book and maybe getting other opinions. And the second he said that, he's like, listen, no problem. I'm flying down tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll meet at my bank. Okay. We'll get a private little room. We'll make this deal happen. We'll figure it out. I fly down there, and he has a set of gloves for me to wear. So I meet him at the bank. He pulls out these blue gloves. He's like, I'd like you to use these. I was like, listen, I'm not touching those things. I don't know how to handle books in those, nor should you. And I've seen this with other people. People know they have value in something. They get really uncomfortable sometimes owning it.
Sure.
So he was one of those people who's like, I don't want to be responsible for this. I'd rather have the money. I feel more comfortable not owning something with value. So between him and his sister, she was going to get a portion of money. He was going to get a portion of money. I go through this book. It's a complete spine split. Okay. It looks beautiful. It looks like a 5.0. There's a complete spine split, white pages. All right. We agree on a price. I'm there at the bank. Give him some money. Get the book. And like, I don't think I've stopped smiling since. Every time I look at that book, I'm so happy to
I
own
would
it.
too. When I heard that story, if I can find the video that you tell the story on, it was so good because like I was just enthralled. Like I listen to Tom's channel a lot when I'll go walk or whatever. If I'm just out piddling around, I'll listen to Tom's stuff. And you were on there one day, and I was like, "Oh my God, what an amazing story!" Because you're right, that is a book that's like a top 5, top 10 book all time. And to find it like that, I don't know. It was just an amazing story. And I know, do you travel like all over the place? Like, will you travel anywhere in the country to find a collection if you got to?
Absolutely, I will. Most of the time it works out. I've had a couple times where it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
One of the time, I got there and looked at the books, and it was in, uh, was it Lansing, somewhere out in Michigan
Michigan.
area?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I got there, and all the books were restored, and he knew, he knew, I know he knew. So he made me waste all my time to fly out there, travel through, go see him, and then it's just like, I know you know, I know you know, and so that was a bust. Twice to New Mexico. God, where have I been? Atlanta a couple times. Um, but yes, I just went to Nashville, and I liked Nashville a lot, by the way.
Nashville's awesome. Yeah, it's one
Yeah,
of my favorite cities.
okay, you get to really see the country when you do that. And the gentleman, when I got there, I was dealing with the son, and he and I were talking, and I thought I was coming out there to buy these books, but when push came to shove, the dad was not ready to let it go. He was still emotionally attached, and sometimes there's no getting through that. He
Yeah.
loves his stuff, and they don't need the money. He has plenty of money. Okay, and we kind of agreed on a number, but he needed more time to really think and let it go, and he couldn't let it go. He gave me a couple token things. He had like a couple pieces of artwork he just threw to me because he know that I liked them. And he
Mm-hmm.
just gave them to me for my time, which was fine. It was well worth it. I was excited to get some artwork, and I'm still hoping that maybe that'll work out. But again, it's stuff, guys. It's all just stuff. But damn it, I love this stuff. It's hard for me to let go of things. It really is. And sometimes I feel a little weird about that. Yeah, but other times I'm happy I held on to them because I
Sure.
do like it. So for some people, that's just what it is. There's memories to all of it.
No, it is, man. Oh, I have that. I mean, in a sense, like it's hard for me, especially if I love something, it's hard for me to let it go. Now, there's other things I don't care because I want to let it go because I want something else, And if it's a book that I think I can get back, especially if it's, really, bronze and above, some Silver Age stuff I have a hard time letting go just because I think it's harder to find. Like if I think it's going to be harder to find, I'll keep it. And if I think, no, I could get one of those pretty much any time, I might have to pay up a little bit, but if I want it back, I can get it. I'll do that. So last question about this is, have you ever come across like an Action One, or like Action One is my holy grail, right? Like I'm a Superman guy. I love Superman, and I will own one someday. Someday I will own it. I may only own it for a week, but I will own it. Have you ever come across anything like that in the wild, like an Action One?
I came across an Action One cover.
Oh,
So
really?
the book was allegedly found in a wall at a construction site. You've heard this story.
Sure.
But the book got taken apart, and people of that construction site got pieces of it, and then the cover was available. So that's the only part. Anytime I've seen the Action One that was the way I saw it. That was the only time I came across that in the wild, unfortunately. I've seen other stuff in the wild, but not that caliber. Will
Yeah.
I again? Coverless Action One, I did see that. Somebody brought to my booth, but they wanted a very large dollar amount at the time, which again was probably should have figured that out somehow, but I don't even know if I could have.
Right.
When you get a coverless at the time, and I think he turned down 80,000 for a
That's so
coverless.
crazy. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I think that was probably 10 years ago or 8 years ago. So anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, no
No.
Action One in the wild,
Now let's
unfortunately.
go. All right. So let's go to question 7. And question 7 is explain this Instagram post. Okay. So I was going through your Instagram and I came across this. And I was like, I have to know what this is all about. So here it is, put up on the screen. And it was a video. It was actually a short. But it says Kentucky in it, and it was horses. And I'm like, this is the horse capital of the world. And I come across this, and it's this little short that you did. So explain this Instagram post.
Yeah, so my wife's really big into riding horses. She's very, very good in dressage. She rides at a very high level. And right now, where she's just taking a break because we got a lot of stuff going on in her life. But we went to the Kentucky show out there. I can't believe I just forgot the name. Oh, the Rolex,
The
okay, or
Rolex,
the
yeah.
Range Rover, whatever they want to call
Yep.
it now. And so, never been to Kentucky. It was a great town. Really enjoyed it. So, she's got a lot of friends now. I mean, she rides at a high level. So when you ride at a high level, you meet a lot of higher end people. So this was the Sarah Cool was this company that provides cooling for horses on their legs. And I don't know much about it. I was just being educated there, but I was enjoying the environment. We're getting into eventing a little bit. We have a horse in that's being trained for my wife to maybe jump to some eventing. But we'll see. But that's how I ended up in Kentucky for a horse show. And the next week, I guess, was the Kentucky Derby. I wish I knew. I would have tried to stick around, but
Well, you'll have to come back sometime because we go to the Derby quite often. I haven't been in a couple of years because of COVID, and I didn't go this year because I fooled around and didn't go. But the Kentucky Derby it's fun, and especially if you're into horses and if your wife rides. I mean, that's even better. But no, I saw that and I thought, Guru's been to Kentucky. What's he been in Kentucky? And it was about horses, and I thought, well, how cool. So I had to ask about that.
yeah, I can't believe how important horses are to Kentucky.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's everywhere. It's
everywhere.
everywhere. So if you're in the horse world, and I didn't grow up with horses. This is my wife's thing. I remember her telling me, God, while we were dating or engaged, she's like, "Hey, one day I want to get back into horses." I was like, "Cool, whatever that means. That sounds great." Oh man, it's a wacky world, and boy, it's like owning multiple boats because it's just a financial
It
suck.
is.
But again, it's also it feeds this emotional place in our heart that's just worth more than that expense. So God bless her, she's got that passion, and I love her for it, and it takes us to all kinds of interesting places and stories and heartbreak and and
No, I know,
excitement.
man. I know. Horse racing is an interesting thing for people who have never been around it, especially people who deal in horses, because I will travel a lot for my work, right? And I'll go to Lexington, I'll go to Frankfurt, and you'll stay at a hotel, you go down to the bar and have a drink at the end of the night, and you end up meeting some interesting people. And some of the most interesting people I've ever met are people who deal in racehorses. It's insane, and they're half crazy. Like it's just interesting. It's an interesting thing if you've never been around it. So no, I saw that and I thought, well, that's cool. I'm gonna ask him about this because it's had to do with Kentucky. I'm in Kentucky. So all right, now question 8. I did want to ask you about your art. Like you do like to collect art. What would be your favorite piece that you have, or what kind of art do you seek out?
Yeah. I got on the art train a little late, because it's so expensive. So I try to
It
find
is.
stuff in the wild. It's hard for me to really just dive into to art, because every time I do want to buy an art piece, as it keeps going in value, it's like, no, I'm going to go to comic, because it's hard for me to justify putting enough money into an art piece and then feeling comfortable that, hey, if I ever need that money back, I could get it. And I just don't feel that market is so liquid as it is with comics. I know if I
Sure.
spend this amount with comics, I know that I can sell it for this amount and to multiple people. If I buy an art piece, I have no idea if I'm going to get my money back, how much more after fees, who I'm going to sell it to. So it's a very tough for me to get into it fully. So I just try to find things in the wild, in collections, or feel that I made at least did okay and comfortable with. Like this John Barron. This is a John Barron painted cover of a
Mm-hmm.
comic book called The Chronicles. I found this that was underneath someone's bed, wrapped up in a sheet for 30 plus years, along with the Golden Age collection in his closet for like 30 plus years. All right, and I got that for a screaming deal, to the point where I wanted to give the guy more money, but he refused to believe that it was worth more. Okay, and I was like, okay. And then after the fact, he's like, hey, I think you got a really good deal on that art piece. It's like, I tried to tell you, man.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
tried. But I did just buy this, and this is Marvel Comics Presents 2,
Mm-hmm.
which is Alex Saviuk, who I actually just met and was a really nice guy. And the back cover as well to it. They came together. The back cover, I flipped it around. It's sitting behind this because I don't like it. And I only had a frame for the front anyways. But this was memorable to me. This was a childhood cover that I remembered. And I was like, you know what? This is a quasi classic key for me for Wolverine. I'm going to dive into it, because anything that's classic Wolverine is just, it's just so expensive. It's like, here's my chance. It wasn't cheap, but I did get something that I really like, and I have it now, and I'm going to appreciate it. So, but the more people I talk to, it's like, I don't know does that resonate with you? That cover? Do you know that cover?
I
Maybe
know
it
that
just resonated
cover.
with me.
It doesn't resonate with me necessarily because that's not necessarily my thing. It's beautiful, but not for me necessarily.
Yeah. If I had to get an art piece for me, I'll tell you the top artist for me. It would be a Bernie Wrightson. I love a really nice horror piece by Bernie Wrightson. That would probably be one of the main pieces I'd love to acquire right now. Maybe a McFarlane Spider-Man. There are quite a few coming up in this next Heritage auction, but that's going to require a lot of money, or sacrificing stuff, which is great because
Sure.
I have things to sell, and I think I would sacrifice some of it to get a McFarlane Spidey with the spaghetti webbing everywhere, and that might be a good place for me this coming auction to do that. And I'll tell you the reason Wrightson is because I love Swamp Thing. I grew up liking the
Yes.
show, and that was the very first big key I ever bought as a kid. I had to split it with a friend of mine. It was like 150 or $200. A gorgeous House of Secrets 92. This was back in like 1994 or something. Signed by Bernie Wrightson. And my friend and I split it, and he had it, and he had that book. That was the last time I saw it. Okay, since 3 years, 4 years ago, I finally
Mm-hmm.
reached out to my friends like, "Where is this book? I will buy you out of it. I just want this book already." He finds it. It was at his mom's house. I had no idea what to expect condition. Where did she keep it? In a shoebox? Did she toss it around? What the hell? Found it. I bought him out of it. That gave him half. I was like, "Hey, this is about what it's worth. I'll give you half. It'll be cool." So now I have it, and it's a special book for me in my personal collection. I do have a Bernie Wrightson head sketch of Swamp Thing. Cool, but I'd love to get a really cool piece one day. One day.
That's cool. I love
Yeah.
that. Now, as far as yourself, do you do a lot of artwork yourself?
I find that I do my art right now because I don't do a lot of drawing. I'm trying to get into it again a little bit because I do a lot of selling. So I do little head sketches from time to time on people's bags when I pack it up,
Hmm.
here and there. But really, I find that I've now put my artistic like mindset to editing vids
Sure.
because I need vids for social media content. I find that I get myself lost in the creativity of it. So that's kind of my new outlet. I figure one day I'll get back into drawing, maybe painting. I used to do a lot of commercial illustration and character design. That's kind of where I was going for a while, and I really liked it. But that took a seat back when I was like trying to make a living, and then comics completely overwhelmed me with more interest. So I still need my outlet, and luckily I find it in editing.
That's cool. And it's actually funny that you said that because I was as your Instagram videos are hilarious. Like, I don't know, they're just funny. Like, even when you're doing your sales, when you do, you're announcing that you're going to be on whatnot or whatever it is that you're doing, it's the video. It's just hilarious. Like, it's funny. And I was like, man, this is great. Like, this is really good. Do you have, like, how long does it take you to make a video like that?
Oh God, jeez Louise. In my mind, when I plan it, some of them are pretty quick. If I really take the time to plan the shots and I have help, great. But usually I'm like, okay, this will take like an hour. All right. It's like 3, 4 hours later, I'm getting lost. I was like, oh wow, I put this together. Now I need the right sound audio. And that sometimes takes the longest. I was like, okay, how do I get creative with the audio of it? Sound bites, cuts, overlays. It's just, and I do it all on my phone. It's just on an app on my phone. So um, yeah, generally, God, 3 hours, 4 hours. I'd like to keep it in an hour. Um, that's where I'd
That's how it
like to
happens for me
be.
too. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like the SpongeBob thing. You think it's going to take an hour, and then 3 hours later. You know,
exactly. And if time
yeah,
does fly, when you're doing it, and before you know it, you're there. So, I mean, I guess that's take that for whatever that's worth.
yeah. Well,
But
the editing part, like doing YouTube videos, like I've never done anything like that. I literally use iMovie on my phone to do everything that I do. I'll
mhm.
edit this on iPhone, on my iPhone. Um, I don't know what I'm doing, but it's almost kind of become like a hobby within the hobby, trying to learn. And I'm watching YouTube videos trying to figure out how to do it. So, no, but they're very creative. Like, I don't know. They're really good. Like, I really enjoy them.
Thank you, man. I mean, look, I try to have fun with it. Like, I don't want to be just a sale page. I don't want to be
Right.
like, okay, look at this book, buy it for this amount. Like, I have fun. I enjoy what I do. Let's all enjoy it. So I try to add some humor and life and
No, it's awesome. Yeah. All right. So this is question 9. This is a really stupid question. Okay. But, or I think it is. Like, I was like, well, I don't know if this is a really good question. This may irritate him. But I saw this, and I've always wanted to ask somebody this. So it says on your Instagram page that you're an Overstreet advisor. Now, I can Google Overstreet advisor and find out what that is. But, like, what is it really? Like, what do you do? Like, how much time does it take for you? Do you have to actually do anything being an Overstreet advisor?
so for being an Overstreet advisor, you need to have multiple references from other people and so some proficiency in the hobby and collecting. And there isn't a ton to becoming one, but it is the references that you're going to need from other people. So I became an Overstreet advisor. God, I don't even know how long ago anymore. But by the end of the year, you have to write an article. Okay. And then they do ask you to fill out paperwork on pricing for certain books and keys, but a lot of people can't get to that. You're like, I don't know. I don't keep track of that marketplace. And they're Overstreet's usually behind on all the big keys. So it's not very relevant for that. But I would say if you want to be an Overstreet advisor, you need to write an article every year and you should keep track of what's happened through that year for people to just look back on and what they should expect for the next year. When I write an article, I kind of express some of the highs and lows of the year and then what my expectations are for next year for certain books. And it's just interesting reading because you get a perspective across the country from so many people. And sometimes that's the only reason people buy the Overstreet price guide is
Yeah.
for the articles.
Yeah.
Just like
That's the only
Playboy,
time, that's the
you
only
only buy
reason
it
I
for
read
the
it.
articles,
Yeah, right.
right?
Exactly. It's just. No, I mean, it was just one of those things where I saw that and I was like, I've looked at it and I've looked it up to see what it is. But I just wondered, like, are you doing stuff monthly? Or is there anything you really just writing an article every year? But you do need to keep up with it. And then, like I said, the articles will be in there. They are interesting to read. I'll read them. So I'm sorry for asking that question. I just wanted to ask it. I was like, what is that exactly? All right. So question 10, and this is just kind of a softball. Just do you have any other hobbies outside of this, outside of comic books and things like that? Do you dig music? Are you into movies? What else? Hanging out. My hobby seems to be hanging out with my kids, but anything outside of this?
Yeah, that's tough because this takes up so much of my time. The editing has almost become a fun hobby because it just helps me get out my, just my artistic juices or, energy. I'm trying to spend as much time with my kids, give them the extra hugs and stuff because they are getting older quick. Things I do like, God, man, I'm trying to stay healthy, try to stay fit, which is like takes its own toll in time because you sit in a chair a lot of the time trying to do things in comics. I'll tell you some of the stuff that was my passion before I got busy with life and kids. I used to play a ton of volleyball.
Really?
That was a lot of fun. Basketball, but I ruptured my Achilles playing basketball, so that stunk. What else? I mean, I watch a lot of TV, but a lot of it has to kind of rotate around comics, right? Because there's so many shows. So it's like keeping up on top of that. Lots of podcasts. I like to listen to podcasts. Usually
is it podcasts that have to do with the hobby, or do you like murder mystery podcasts? Or
yeah, I don't like to listen to podcasts about hobbies, about the hobby because I need to break it up. So I'll listen to, I don't know, stuff on, let's see, Neil deGrasse Tyson, on astronomy and stuff like that, or Joe Rogan, who always has just a variety of people.
Yeah, he's always got
so it's always just like I'm always learning and like, oh, who's this guy? Okay, great. Get into him. Try to stay out of the political realm because just more frustrating than anything.
That's just depressing.
Yeah, that's just depressing and frustrating. I did just do jury duty for 7 weeks, which you maybe saw, which was the Amber Heard trial, and I'm not into that nonsense usually, but boy, that was a train wreck I could not stop staring at.
No doubt.
So fascinating.
That was the biggest train wreck. I've never seen anything like that before. I thought, really what came to my mind, though, is I was like, where are they trying to take our mind off of? Because I can't stop watching this.
Exactly. I mean, it was so entertaining, unfortunately.
No, you're right about Rogan. I love Rogan. I listen to it pretty much every night before I go to bed. I kind of sit and listen because you're right. He just has so many eclectic people on there. And he has a very common sense view about him. I like murder mystery podcasts too. My wife likes those. And so I'll listen to those sometimes as well.
Yeah, my wife loves true crime stuff, so
yeah, my wife does.
She's always been into that, and now she watches a ton of documentaries. So I'll get caught up in some documentary. We're just watching it, but
absolutely. Well, man, that's 10 questions. That's been 10
questions. No, come on.
Yes, I swear it was like 10 questions that turned into 50. That's what the show is, right? So, but no, man, Jeff, thank you so much, man, for coming on. I really enjoyed this. I hope you did. It was very informative, and it was everything I hoped my 75th episode would be.
Oh my God, thank you so much. It's really been fun. I can't believe it's 10 questions already. I was like, let's do another 10.
I got about 20 more.
Okay. Well, if you guys, anybody else here has questions about Golden Age books or whatever, you can find me on IG at Golden Age Guru. I usually try to get back to as many people, if not everybody, as I can. So, but thank you for having me on this awesome show, and I really appreciate it, man.
No, man, I really do appreciate it. Guys, all Golden Age's stuff will be linked down in the description below so you can find him easily. This has been 10 Questions.